The rally continued on Friday. The Dow is still below 45,000. Again, if it can get above it, once again, it might try to move to a new all-time high on an intraday basis, 45,016, and then retreated. The intraday high was previously 45,000, I think 74 or 76 back in late 2024. I was up 208 points, up just under 0.5% to 44,901. The S&P was up 0.40%, up 25 points. It was above 30 points at the highs of the session, closing in on 6,400. It closed at 63.89, rounding up. The NASDAQ was up about 0.25%, up 50 points. This is NASDAQ Composite. The Russell was up 0.40%, same as the S&P 500. The VIX was down nearly 3% to close just under 15 at 14.93. This week is going to be very busy. We're going to have the Fed meeting, the announcement with rates, and again, they're not going to be raising rates. We'll have the Fed press conference there on Wednesday. We'll have a boatload of earnings, a lot of Magnificent Seven stocks. And then Friday, we'll have Trump's tariffs. I told you at the bottom that the launch of the tariffs back in April would be associated with the bottom. Everybody was calling for the crash. Now everybody's shrugging off the tariffs. I told you the launch of these tariffs with the August 1st dates will be associated with a top and a sell-off. You can see the top before August 1st tariff date. We do have earnings next week. You got some Dow earnings that might push it to a new all-time high. Certainly possible if the S&P can reach the upper boundary of the rising wedge, pushing above the upper Bollinger Band. I'll show you that chart. So again, that's still very, very possible. Or it could be the Dow rises and masks what's going on if we start seeing the distribution with the S&P and the NASDAQ. It sometimes plays out that way. On Wednesday after the bell, we're going to get Meta. We're going to get Microsoft right after the Fed announcement. Next day on Thursday, we'll get Apple and Amazon after the bell going into the Friday session. And a lot of big name companies here. I don't have time to go through them all. A lot of earnings next week, a lot of big names reporting next week. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please support the channel today. I just ask that you partner with me and do that rather than trying to sell you a bunch of stuff and get sponsors. Contact me all the time. I turn those offers down. I don't want to sell you anything. I'm not a salesman. I need to hear from you in order to make that work. So if you can follow the link below to take you to a secured site and you can donate any amount you want, I thank you for your consideration for that. Check back on Sunday. I'll be talking about some different indicators, warning signs. We're testing the Bollinger Bands, the upper Bollinger Bands on NASDAQ and S&P. I told you I'm watching these upper Bollinger Bands. I'm watching the upper boundary of the rising wedges to see, can we make it all the way up there? If we can get above the upper band here on the NASDAQ, then you might do it. With earnings with the Fed and everything, it's possible we still might do that. NASDAQ has been consistently holding above the 20-day moving average. That's this dotted line right here, the 20-day moving average. We bounced off of it. We've been holding above it. One of the longest periods in history. This is what happens right before the completing of the blow-off top. See this happen. We got candles of indecision yesterday. I told you, again, they could be continuation or they can be reversal bars. Going higher on NASDAQ, we're going higher in the S&P 500. But divergences are clearly forming. I keep telling you, the divergences may not be done yet. It's possible it is at this upper band. Now, if we can get above the upper band, then you've got a shot at going to this upper boundary of the rising wedge. If you do that, the MACD could turn back up and form a divergence in this most recent price action. It is diverging in that the MACD is at a lower level, but it could get back above the signal line, so that is still possible. Do not rule that out. You do have a possible larger divergence, either done or about to finish. So again, I'm going to be watching as we go into next week. upper band here. If we start selling off ahead of the Fed or with the Fed, then we may not reach that level. If we rally surrounding earnings, surrounding the Fed, rally with the Fed, we still may try to reach that level. We are going to have Trump's tariffs being launched next Friday. And again, the herd told us, again, that was just going to crash the market down here. We're already in a recession. I told you Trump was going to pause his tariffs, reduce them, or both. And he ended up pausing the reciprocal tariffs, putting in a flat rate of 10%. So he did both. I correctly predicted that would happen. Predicted we'd go to new highs. Just as that launching of the tariffs marked a bottom, so too this launching of the tariffs will be associated with a top. Likely a short-term top, a push to new highs, probably a final top later, few months from now. Possibly in September or October. If we get the seasonality, we're going to sell off in August. I think we're going to go move to new all-time highs. And I think we'll finish the blow-off top in just a few months. So I'll be watching. Do we start the pullback here? Again, I believe it's a pullback. You got people told us we were going to crash down here, told us we were never going up to see this rally. We were never going to go to new highs. People now telling us to have this crash. When we get up here, they're going to say, oh, double top pattern or triple top pattern. December and the February top, we'd be calling for a double or triple top, depending on if you those two peaks as one peak. That's what people are doing. I believe we're just going to get a pullback towards the cloud, towards the 200 period moving average. But watch the Bollinger Band. The Bollinger Bands are tightening. Again, we can get rejection at the Bollinger Band, or if we can start closing back above it, we can go up and test this trend line and get rejection there. I'll be watching closely. It may be if NVIDIA starts selling off, will the NASDAQ. Watching to see, does that happen before the Fed meeting, before the tariffs, or do we buy a little bit more time and a few more days? Again, hit the July 3rd peak, went sideways, drifting higher ever so slightly. And I've continued to talk about the upper Bollinger Band possibly being reached, or this upper boundary, but I told you we may not. We don't have to reach it. Stochastic still turning up, so we'll be watching to see if these divergences come to a conclusion. And is our doji here a continuation that maybe gets us closer to the upper boundary and above this upper Bollinger Band here, the upper boundary of the rising wedge, the upper boundary getting back above the upper boundary of the Bollinger Band. When we peaked in December, we had been above the upper band. We turned down just much like what we had over here, but then we went a few more days higher, and we did get another close above that upper band, and then that marked a turn for the December sell-off. Went up and got a peak and just tagged it in January. Got another sell-off to form this larger divergence on the RSI. And then February, we went a little bit higher, but February, we kind of closed just ever so slightly above that upper band and then just pretty much slammed into it here at the February high, pushed back below the band, and we began to get that sell-off. So do we have something similar to here where we just turn off the band, or do we get back above it, something like what we had in December? Over here in January and February, we just kind of turned off of it, slightly closing above it in February, not being able to close above it in January. So again, I'll be watching the upper band as we go into next week. Could just turn off of it, or may attempt to reach the upper boundary of the rising wedge if we try to get above it. No guarantee that we do that. NASDAQ 100 was up 52 points. It was up just under 0.25% on Friday. You can see that Bollinger Band up close and personal here on the NASDAQ 100 daily chart, the doji, and then we go up, we tag that upper band and turn off of it by the close. NASDAQ has a Class B divergence with this larger divergence from the peaks over here. Class B divergence where you have two equal peaks really on the indicator where price goes higher. But in this most recent price action, we have a Class A divergence where price is going higher and the indicator is making a lower high. If we finish here, we need to see the RSI drop back below 70. If we try to go higher, watch that up, see if we close above the upper Bollinger Band, and then the rising wedge could be tested, the upper boundary. It's like in NVIDIA, I think we're going to get a wave 4, then I think we're going to get a wave 5, and then I think we're going to complete the bull market, and that could be with the sell-off with our seasonality, and then going on and trying to rally in the coming months ahead. But you'd be watching to see if NASDAQ would try to turn back up and get a divergence here in this most recent price action. Bouncing off the 50 here in the 60-minute time frame, bouncing off the 10, or if it would fail, we ended up getting it. We have this multiple point divergence. We got one in the most recent price action from this peak right here to our peak here that we got on Friday. And then we have these other peaks. Again, you can clearly see the multiple points of divergence. This original divergence gave us a correction sideways. Then we drifted slightly higher, bouncing off of our 50 period, bouncing off of our cloud here. The herd was super bearish at the bottom. Now they're super bullish. Down here, they didn't think price could rise. Up here, they don't think it could fall into the trap because the divergence doesn't play out immediately. It's still carving out because it doesn't sell off immediately. It's not going to happen. And again, my signals are still bullish for momentum and the trend signals, but I'm warning these divergences are going to play out and flip my signals. I told you I'm looking for a top. Called one yet. Yesterday I told you possible we have one if the little topping tail on the S&P yesterday was validated, negated. We went higher above it. I told you if we did go higher, we could see these divergences develop in the most recent price action. And that's what has happened here on the NASDAQ. That's what's happening on the S&P 500. Parameter forming a nice looking divergence here, and we have the same thing going on with the S&P 500. Now Thursday I told you that we could turn back up here on the RSI here in the 60-minute time frame and still go above that peak, but I told you we did have still a divergence, multiple point divergence with these other points, just like on NASDAQ. But I told you we might see one here in the most recent price action. That scenario ended up playing out. Towards the end of the session on Thursday, I closed my long positions, tried short positions, tagging the upper Bollinger Band with the S&P above it. We actually closed above it on Friday. RSI is at extremes, and we have a lot of signals that are warning that we're very, very extended here. But I told you I could get stopped out, try to go higher, and I did. We inched up above the previous high a little bit. That's forming a divergence right here. That's forming a divergence on the 15-minute chart. These larger divergences. So we'll see what becomes of this. I'm trying to be disciplined, so took a position, put in a stop right at the highs, got stopped out. We went higher, and again, now forming this because we talked about this yesterday, this possibility. I've reset the position just a little bit higher here near the highs of the session, and then we started turning off of that level just a little bit. I'll show you what I was looking at on the 15-minute chart, but I was looking at this divergence right here, divergence that's forming on the 15-minute chart. What I played yesterday was on the intraday charts as well, the 15. Here we have this larger divergence, but I told you we might get one in this more recent price action, and 15 period got a multiple point divergence. So stopped out, trying it again. If my position starts going in the correct direction, then I'll begin to add to it. Got stopped out on the NASDAQ. I got stopped out on the S&P with very tight stops, and I could get stopped out again. I'm trying to be very disciplined. I've locked in my long position gains to flip the trade here, but I said yesterday, again, I could easily be stopped out, and we could still go up to that upper boundary of the rising wedge if we can above the upper Bollinger Band on the S&P and get back above it on NASDAQ. Rounding earnings, Fed, certainly still possible. Trying to play this divergence right here. Unsuccessful so far with my first attempt. We'll see what happens here. But part of being a good trader is trying to manage risk. That's what I did back over here. My signals bearish with momentum. The trend signals didn't turn bearish, but I closed my positions and quickly reopened them because we saw momentum turn right back to bullish. Now, right now, again, momentum is still bullish with my signals. My trend signals are still bullish. If these divergences play out, then you can see my signals change. Again, I'm just speculating on these divergences. And like I said in yesterday's and Thursday's video, S&P's risen 31%. I caught most of that move. NASDAQ has had an even bigger move. So I've closed my long positions, and we may go higher. We may go up to these upper boundaries of the rising wedge. It's still possible. But again, Trying to speculate here. Thursday didn't play out. Now I'm going to try it and see if it plays out here with Friday. May not. We got to drop back below the 50, drop back below the 200. We got to start seeing a sell-off if this is going to play out. Part of trading is being disciplined, using stops and trying to manage risk. You can make mistakes as a trader, but you got to cut those losses short. I've had a massive gain, so I have the luxury speculating on the diversions. I could just simply wait a signal to change. As I said, I think the upside potential is limited here. I think it's getting very risky for a long position. That's why I close my long positions, speculating on short positions. And if they're proven to be correct, I'll begin to build upon them. So I'm watching to see if this comes to a conclusion here. While I've been looking for a top, I've not yet called a top. Even yesterday, while I said possible we have one in, we see one in the next few days, and that still stands. We still could see one here today or in the next few days, but I have not yet called a top. Down here, we are at major support when I called the bottom. Major horizontal support on the S&P and the NASDAQ. The rising trend, long-term rising trend on the S&P 500. 9 count on NVIDIA. There were several validating factors and a confluence of support. Right here, we would need to see a little bit more evidence if we do in fact have a top or go a little bit higher and get a top. We'd need to see just a little bit more evidence. So the divergence that I talked about yesterday ended up playing out here. So I got stopped out trying to play this divergence now late in the session there, and I'll show you on the 15-minute chart. Let me flip over to that. Here on the S&P 500, here's the divergence that I was playing on Thursday, and that black candlestick daily chart, it was not confirmed. We went higher and I got stopped out. So I'm trying to play this divergence right here. We have this divergence on the RSI and the rate of change, and you got it down here on the other oscillators, MACD and the price oscillator, stochastic rolling back over. So we rallied up, got above that upper Bollinger Band in the S&P. We still may go higher. Trying to play this divergence, and again, I could easily be stopped out on this. I'm just speculating, and remember, my signals remain bullish. I'm not recommending anybody buy or sell anything, but I'm just telling you, again, I think that the upside is going to be limited. I think we are going to see a sell-off. We're going into major earnings next week, so we still may try to hit that upper Bollinger Band. I told you that's very possible as long as signals remain bullish. So speculating here, if it proves to be correct, I'll begin to build upon that position. If my signals start validating it with momentum turning bearish, trend signals eventually following suit and turning bearish. If we keep going towards the upper boundary of the rising wedge, we may get above 6,400. Keep that in mind. Again, I'm just trying to place some of these divergences on the 60-minute chart, on the 15-minute chart, being very disciplined, and I could easily be stopped out here. The highs of the session towards the end of yesterday's session, and then again towards the end of this session on Friday. See what becomes of this divergence. These other divergences in the 15-minute time frame have created some volatility. We'll see what becomes of this one. It still may not be done yet. We may see the RSI turn back up if a rally initially on Monday. So again, I'm speculating on it. That doesn't mean it's complete, and as a trader, I recognize that. I'm saying I'm not calling a top yet because I don't have the evidence for it yet. Soon may see that happen. We'll see what happens here. I got stopped out over here. You can see we went higher, but then we kind of sideways and ended up forming this divergence on all the indicators here. And we had that divergence on the 60-minute chart that I was watching for, trying to play these divergences on the 15-minute chart and on the 60-minute chart. The S&P has a Class B divergence where we have these two equal peaks, and this peak may go much higher. We've seen that happen before, like over here with the low, we went to a new low. We had no divergence at the bottom. It was just an extreme. So again, we'll be watching. Right now you got a possible Class B divergence. May not be done yet. Again, watching the upper boundary of the rising wedge here. We broke this trend line, and then we came back up to it, bouncing off our 20 period. We've been holding at that 20 and 10 period moving average. Still got a rising wedge here from these lows here to the pullback to the 20 period, towards the 20 period, and this low right here. but we still may reach that upper boundary. If we don't, then we need to come down and start taking out the 10 and 20 period in the cloud right here. We need to see the RSI drop back below 70. If we rally up to the upper boundary, we may see the RSI move to a new extreme, much like what we saw here. The bottom, certainly possible if we do that surrounding earnings, or the Fed will be watching. And remember, my signals remain bullish. Told you though, the MACD may turn back up and we might get a divergence in this most recent price action when we had that peak on January 3rd. We saw the MACD turn up here and then it's been going down and now we're coming back up. You got a possible multiple point divergence with the peak back over here, but in the most recent price action as well. So I'll be watching. Do we reach that upper boundary of the rising wedge? We still may do it. The stochastic turn back up. It's holding at extremes for an extended period of time. We'll be watching to see if it tries to roll over at some point next week. Again, what I've talked about with NASDAQ and NVIDIA, same thing here with the S&P. I think we're going to see a peak soon. We'll pull back at the wave 4 towards the 200, towards the cloud, and then I think you're going to get the final climax high, the final phase of the blow off top. You get complete primary wave 5, these 5 waves that will make up our cycle top. There's the Roman numeral 5 there. We had 3 here, 4, and then we get 5 with unfolding in 5 primary waves. And with that MACD, the histogram is just slightly in negative territory, so it does turn back up. We could see that happen. This is what happened. Just go back to the other chart here for a second. This is what happened back over here. The MACD rolled over, then it turned back up, and we went higher for a few more days. If that happens, we can go slam up into that upper boundary of the rising wedge, and you can see the MACD turn back up ever so slightly and then turn back down. And again, it ended up that we moved above this high, but we formed a divergence with the high over here from December, and you can clearly see that divergence here on the S&P 500. Do we have something similar to that here, or do we not get above the signal line? We just start selling off. We don't have to get that other reference point of a divergence turning above the signal line. We still have a divergence present, and we don't have to be above the signal line, but we very well could be if we try to reach the upper boundary of the rising wedge here. So as I said yesterday, I think the risk is getting higher and higher, but we still may reach this upper boundary of the rising wedge. So S&P 500 closing above the upper Bollinger Band. May get several closes above the upper band if we try to reach this upper boundary right here, which again is directly overhead. So we'll be watching that. Could get rejection around the upper Bollinger Band. NASDAQ's tagging it if we move towards this upper band. Again, NASDAQ may try to get above the upper band. S&P closed just above it there on Friday. Again, let me just bring up the previous peaks here, talking about the upper Bollinger Band. We're tagging it here. As I said, when we were up here, straddling along it, we closed back below it. We ended up correcting sideways. Sometimes you go back up to that upper band and you get just above it, or you go up and tag it. Right now we're getting just above it. Over here at the December peak, we came up to the band and we tagged it. Got to close just slightly above it and then turn down off of it for the December high. Did the same thing in January. Got to close above it, turn down off of it, and then we pull back. To go a little slightly bit higher in February. And in February, and I'm going to move the trend line with the divergence here so you can see in February we came up, we tagged it, and then we turned off of it sharply. And again, the tightening of the Bollinger Bands, and we began to move down. We've got the tightening of the Bollinger Bands right now, so something's getting ready to happen. Here we've gotten rejection either just slightly above that upper band or just underneath it. Do we see something like that? Again, speculating on the divergence again on the 15-minute chart, on the 60-minute chart, completing a divergence in the recent price action. I could be completely wrong. We may be headed towards this upper boundary. If we can hold above the upper boundary of the Bollinger Band, we can head towards the upper boundary of the rising wedge. Speculation on my part. Again, my signals remain bullish. Just telling you, I'm looking turn in this area, and it may be a few more days. I could be completely wrong in speculating here, and I recognize, and I've said, still may go a little bit higher. Signals have been bullish, but I think there's huge risk going forward, and that's why I've closed my long positions, trying to speculate on the short side. So far, with Thursday's attempt, that didn't play out. But it may not, so we'll be watching. Right here, it may not play out. May get stopped out again, head up to towards that upper boundary. I'll probably attempt it again near that trend line if this attempt fails. Again, I'm trying to be disciplined. I'm trying to manage risk. I believe that we're going to get a pullback, and I'd rather just close my long positions and then speculate on the short side, because you can get a bar. We start getting reversible. You can get something really ugly, things off like we had here, over here, some of the bigger ones on these declines. But I do expect volatility is going to happen very, very soon.